Alright, so this is going to be a review of the WBA Super Flyweight Unification fight between Kohei Kono, the now former WBA Super Flyweight champion, and Luis Nica Concepcion, the new WBA Super Flyweight champion. No super, just the full titleist, former interim champion. Of course, this was mandated by the WBA, who were trying to unify all of their titles across all the weight divisions. This is basically the latest fight that they managed to make it so that they unified the titles for. Really a great fight, an impressive fight, especially in the later rounds. It started off a little bit on the one-sided side for the first few rounds, but things started to pick up in the mid-rounds and carried in all the way from the mid-rounds into the late rounds, and was just a fun fight to watch, including one of the rounds that I'll get to in a little bit that I think is definitely probably not the winner, but definitely in the running as a honorable mention for a round of the year candidate because of just how good it was. So let me get to a little bit of a round by round. Kono started off in a little bit of almost a moving rope-a-dope where he has a very high guard, and the thing is he's actually the taller fighter of the two. He's a 5'5.5". Concepcion's about 5'2", 5'2.5". He's a guy that formerly had campaigned at flyweight, for instance. But you wouldn't necessarily know that considering the fact that he has so much power. He definitely came at Kono looking to land big, hard shots. Did manage to land a couple of good shots on the inside, good shots to the body. And one of the mistakes that Kono was making is the fact that he was hunching over. And the thing is, that's kind of his style to a large degree. He does hunch over a little bit. He does give away a little bit of his height. But I think a lot of that is because of the fact that he's trying to get a lot of speed on his shots. He's trying to sit down and really ratchet off, 4, 5, 6 punch combinations. That's the way basically he was able to beat Koki Kameda on a big PBC card last year in a fight that he was actually the underdog in. Kameda was coming in as the favorite. But pretty much all the Kameda brothers aren't necessarily the biggest of punchers. They're guys that tend to be a bit more stylistic, a bit more on the technical boxing sense. And especially Koki, for instance, is a guy that started off at 108 pounds, and he was a guy that was able to kind of weight bully a lot of guys down there, but at 115, he doesn't necessarily have the overall strength and power. So against somebody like a Kono, who's very, very high stamina, high volume, and high speed. So where against Kameda, he didn't really necessarily have to worry about a lot of return fire. Against Concepcion, he was a lot more worried, and I think that kind of played itself out as well, too, throughout the fight, including in the first round where Concepcion was landing big shots where even if he wasn't necessarily hitting Kono cleanly, he was moving Kono around the ring. And I thought that kind of carried on pretty much through the first 3 rounds, or the first 4 rounds, where Concepcion was landing just more cleanly. Kono was shelling up a little bit too much. He was throwing a little bit too slappily, almost like slapping with his punches as opposed to really turning them over, whereas you could see Concepcion was really turning his punches over. And even though he wasn't necessarily landing especially cleanly against Kono, Kono also wasn't landing especially cleanly against him. And he was moving Kono around the ring, so you could see a visual difference between the effect that both guys' punches were having. Concepcion was appearing to really land the harder and cleaner shots, just overall in general, and also just the fact that he was landing more of them too, because Kono seemed a little bit hesitant to really throw. It wasn't probably until the 4th round where Kono started really throwing a bit more to the body. They started trading a little bit. Kono started landing cleaner, and funny enough, Kono actually was landing better on the inside than Concepcion was. He's one of these guys that, yeah, he gives away his height, but when he's fighting on the inside, he's actually really good. He has quick hands, and he's able to, a lot of the times, land 3, 4, 5 punches on an opponent, whereas the opponent may only be able to land 1 shot on him. However, the difference in power was definitely noticeable, where there were occasions where Concepcion was able to land that 1 shot, and it would do... You'd see a significant difference in the reaction from Kono as opposed to the 4 or 5 punch type of a shoe shine combination that he was landing on Concepcion. It wasn't really until the 5th round where I actually gave a round to Kono, where he started actually stalking Concepcion. Concepcion was moving a little bit more. Kono was actually doing a really good job of walking Concepcion down. I think at this point is where Concepcion started to tire just a tad. Concepcion in the early rounds was landing, and whenever he got hit himself, he was actually rolling really well with the punches. Kono, by comparison, doesn't necessarily have that innate ability to really roll with shots. To like, he can almost like feel the punch coming and roll with the shot to take a lot of the steam off of it. He was simply trying to block it with his gloves, which he did do very well on occasion, but he wasn't necessarily doing, with a high enough consistency to completely take the power off of Concepcion shots. But around the fifth round, however, Concepcion, I thought, started to slow down in terms of his ability to roll with the shot. So Kono was actually landing cleaner, and you could really see the full effect, the full power of the punch really moving Concepcion's head around, if not, snapping it back, which it wasn't quite doing, because of the fact that he was still rolling, moving around a lot, doing a lot of bob and weave. But Kono was definitely landing more clearly by the mid rounds, especially with a lot of the body work that he started doing. Concepcion, of course, was responding with his own good body work. They would trade right hands on occasion. Usually Concepcion's would land more cleanly, but in spite of the fact that Kono would occasionally get his head snapped back, he would respond with just streams of punches, combinations of punches that appeared to, like, as we got into about the 6th, the 7th, the 8th round, started to appear to really wear on Concepcion, where he really started to slow down. You could see it just in his pacing, the fact that he wasn't throwing as many punches, the fact that he was initiating a bit more of the clinches as opposed to Kono, and just the fact that Kono was just, he was like an Energizer Bunny. He was just a non-stop punching machine, just throwing punches and bunches constantly. And the fact that even though Concepcion had landed some pretty good shots, he was also missing quite a few, which I think sapped a lot of his energy as well. And then this will pretty much lead me into the round that I thought is definitely a round of the year candidate, round 8, where probably in about the first 5 to 10 seconds of the round, Concepcion landed a right uppercut followed by a left uppercut, and that left uppercut hit Kono with just intense force that almost like sent Kono like into the ropes face first. He managed to catch his balance before he completely fell into the ropes. And he got, he turned around, and Concepcion started just, teeing off on him, basically. He managed to get him into one of the opposite corners of the ring. But then, just as soon as he got Kono into that corner, Kono just started, like, almost like a Sugar Ray Leonard against the Marvin Hagler, just started throwing just hard combinations, just like almost like a Hail Mary type of combination in order to get Concepcion off him. And he did. He managed to land several of those shots, back Concepcion off. And from that point, just the two of them were trading hard shots. Kono started going back to the body and then mixing it up to the body and the head. And I think that took a lot of the overall confidence away from Concepcion, because whereas he had just hurt this guy, all of a sudden now Kono's fighting back even harder than he had been before. And so I think that sapped a little bit out of Concepcion. And by the end of the round, I actually wound up giving it to Kono. It was a close round, though. It could have been a swing round. You could have given it to Concepcion. I wound up giving it to Kono. But just overall, it was a great round. The only thing that maybe mars it a little bit is there was a head clash that opened up a cut around Kono's left eye. But overall, just a great round. Concepcion was looking to land one shot to drop Kono, because he had hurt him earlier, but Kono was in the midst of Concepcion searching for that perfect shot, was ratcheting off just excellent work of his own. In round 9, they pretty much started meeting at ring center. It was another close round. I wound up giving it to Concepcion. Concepcion was able to hurt Kono a couple of times. Kono appeared to stun Concepcion. Kono wasn't, or actually, Concepcion wasn't quite rolling the shots quite as well. And I actually gave round 9 to Kono as well, not Concepcion. Concepcion landed a couple good hooks, but Kono was overall landing the cleaner, more effective shots in round 9. Kind of continuing on with the theme of Concepcion starting to lose his energy, lose his stamina. His stamina seemed to really be sapped in large part going into the mid to late rounds. In round 10, Concepcion came out a little bit better. Landed hard to the body, hard to the head. The two of them landed good shots. They both were trading. And that was pretty much the story into round 11. And not so much in round 12, however. They traded on pretty even terms in round 11. But by the time round 12 came around, it seemed like now Kono was the one that was really tired. He did wind up getting cut above the left eye. and after the breaks, for the doctor to look at and everything, and it was a cut from a headbutt, Concepcion would come out just blazing, coming at Kono, realizing that the fight was close, realizing that he needed to win the championship rounds in order to win the championship and win the fight. And I thought that Concepcion wound up doing much better, especially in the 12th round, where I think he finished extremely strongly, definitely stronger than Kono was able to. Kono appeared to have his energy pretty much completely sapped in the 12th round. Concepcion was coming forward, landing just clean, hard shots, backing Kono up. Kono appeared to almost get stunned, probably in the last 30 to 45 seconds a couple of times in the round, but he did fight back just, valiantly. He was fighting back to trying to keep his title, but overall it just quite wasn't enough. Concepcion was landing the cleaner, harder shots, but they pretty much traded as the final bell rang, and it was just another really solid ending to just a solid fight. And I wound up having it 115 to 113 for Luis Concepcion, which is what one of the judges had it as well, 115, 113. The other two had it 116 to 112, all for Luis Concepcion. And of course, as I mentioned before, he's now the full WBA super flyweight champion, potentially in line, to unify. There has been, they interviewed him after the fight. He said that he'd be open to unifying with either Inoue or the winner of Quadras versus Gonzalez, or even the winner of McJoe Arroyo versus Joran Akas, who are actually going to be fighting here in a couple days. Of course, also now Inoue is going to be fighting in a few days as well against Pechbanbon Kokijim, a.k.a. Karun Jarupian Lard. And Quadras, of course, is defending his title against Roman Gonzalez. So a lot of implications out there. I could very well see Concepcion being either a debut opponent for Naoya Inoue or Juan Francisco Estrada should he choose to move up for his next fight, because it's appearing like Estrada and Kazuto Ioka may be actually going to purse bids, and they actually may get that fight done, which is a little bit of a surprise. I wasn't sure if Ioka's people were going to quite let that happen, but it looks like Estrada's actually going to be vacating his WBO title potentially in order to focus on the unification for the WBA at flyweight, where he as the super champion will be fighting Kazuto Ioka as the regular champion. Although there is also an interim champion there too, so that kind of complicates matters further. Snap Kiatnewat of Thailand. But at super flyweight, as I mentioned in my other video, things are heating up. Concepcion beat Kono in a close but good, well-fought decision, proving that he's definitely one of the top fighters to be reckoned with at the weight class, albeit I'm not sure if I'd rate him amongst the top of the actual champions. Naoya Inoue definitely still rates as the top-rated fighter, along with Carlos Quadras, and the fighter that Quadras beat for the title, Sisakitsu Rongvisai, is definitely up there, probably about equal level to Concepcion. And then Arroyo versus Ancas, that's a little bit of a wild card. Of course, Arroyo had the good win over Arthur Villanueva. Wasn't necessarily the most eye-pleasing fight, but he also has a good win over Hernan Tyson Marquez, which can't be discounted. But as far as Concepcion goes, he's probably about number 3 or number 4 in the division. Just a good standing. And the thing is, he's willing and open to unify. He definitely wants to get a piece of the potential HBO or Showtime pie that's out there now that the super flyweights have a bit more light shown on them by the mainstream Western stations, mainstream U.S. TV stations and everything. So I would definitely love to see Concepcion against any of the fighters that I mentioned, whether it's a unification with the Quadras versus Gonzalez winner, or the Inoue versus Kokijim winner, or Juan Francisco Estrada, should he happen to move up, depending on how things go with regards to his purse bid situation with Kazuto Ioka, or if he fights a stay-busy opponent at 112 in the meantime, because he wasn't able to get an immediate title shot since the WBA mandated this fight between Kono and Concepcion. But just an excellent win for Concepcion. Definitely one of the top fighters at super flyweight. And the thing is, in most other divisions, he would be a number 1 or number 2 fighter. But the super flyweight division is packed enough that he may even be number 5, compared to some of these other guys. But in spite of that, just major props to him. Excellent fight and an excellent win, managing to finish strong in spite of the fact that he looked like he was tiring late. And that's pretty much all I could say about it. So with that said, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.